December. This group is full of very dedicated students, and it's truly been a pleasure working with them all year. We're going to start the evening off with this ensemble's favorite tune, Tank. Tank serves as the main theme from Cowboy Bebop, an anime from the 90s where the main characters are bounty hunters that travel using their spaceship, aptly named Bebop. Hayden Heiser on alto sax. Teddy Lester Bull on bongos. And Cain Avellone on trumpet. This next one is an original work by Greg Yasinitsky entitled Bayview Drive. You heard from Alexander Swabshire on trombone. You may have seen our lead alto saxophone's music fall on the ground. I wasn't worried about it because last year I thought he was using his music most of the time in rehearsals, but sometimes he just had his phone up and he was playing for a dancing cockroach on YouTube. He just memorized his music, so I wasn't worried about it. All right, so for our next tune, we're gonna bring out, he's okay, senior Logan Huff to sing for us. I had Logan in piano class last semester and learned about his passion for singing and decided that I wanted to collaborate with him. Since then, Logan has earned a spot in the all-state choir this year, singing the bass part. He plans to pursue music education at my alma mater, the University of Missouri, St. Louis. He's going to sing one of the most famous jazz standards of all time, backed by our jazz ensemble. Here's Fly Me to the Moon, arranged by Quincy Jones for the Count Basie Big Band.
Fly me to the moon, let me play among the stars. Let me see what spring is like on Jupiter and Mars. In other words, hold my hand. In other words, baby, kiss me. Fill my heart with song and let me sing forevermore. You are all I long for, all I worship and adore. In other words, please be true. In other words, I love you.
How about another round of applause? Thank you, Erik. Next, we're going to feature another senior, Cain on flugelhorn. He's going to play another popular jazz standard entitled I Remember Clifford. Benny Golson, jazz legend in his own right, composed I Remember Clifford in 1956, shortly after the death of 25-year-old trumpet player Clifford Brown. Clifford Brown was a rising star in the jazz world, and his life was tragically cut short in a car accident. Before his passing, he gave the world many jazz hits that are now standards, most notably Sandu and Joy Spring. Here we feature Cain Avellone and the Parkway South Jazz Ensemble performing I Remember Clifford. for Cain. We've got one more tune for you tonight. But before we talk about that, I wanted to remind you to be sure to check out the other concerts happening in our area before we close out the school year. It means so much to have an involved community who cares about what we're doing here at South High. The last tune we have for you tonight is a Goodwin chart entitled Wise Up. Goodwin is a West Coast jazz legend who composed the music from Disney's Incredibles. Mr. Goodwin unfortunately lost his battle with pancreatic cancer on December 8th last year. We wanted to honor him this year by playing one of his tunes. Here is Goodwin's Wise Up. You're going to hear from Aiden Johnson on tenor sax. Thank you all for coming out tonight. tonight. Thank you for joining us, and drive safe.